Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Myra Show. Here I have a special guest today, the young and fabulous Marie Antoinette. So, before we get to the good information, can you give us a brief details of where you were born and what your original name was? You know, your original background.
I was born in Holzburg Palace in Vienna, Austria. My original name was Marie Antoinette, and when I moved to France to marry King Louis, it was changed to Marie Antoinette.
Okay.
Yes. Yes.
So tell us a little bit of your childhood. Like you were baptized. Who you might want to tell us who your godparents were?
Yes. My godparents were the King and Queen of Portugal.
That's very interesting.
Yes. We're worldwide.
So, how was your childhood like?
Oh, I was never lonely. On the contrary, as of Louis, I was never lonely. I never had the chance to be alone, to have time for myself.
Okay.
Which still was okay with me. I mean, everyone wanted to be around me. But I did have a close relationship with my eldest sister, Maria Carolina. She loved me extraordinarily. Yes. I was loved by all the people of Austria. Yes.
That's very wonderful.
Can
you tell us how you were educated as a child? How were you brought up?
I wasn't educated well, honestly. I do give it to Louis. He was very well educated, but I was not. I mean, at this time, us ladies were not as educated as the men were. We were taught appropriate manners. I was more educated with how my manners were, and of course my appearance, the way I looked, how high my hair was. Yes. So yes, I was more fabulous than everyone, if you must say. In a way, I was trained that way, to be fabulous every day, and every time I look at me, I'm fabulous.
Yeah.
It comes naturally. I didn't need to be taught.
Of course not. We all appreciate your beauty.
Yes, thank you.
So tell us, how did it all start with King Louis?
Well, you must first know that, our private lives were very different. I was more relaxed, I should say, more relaxed than other princesses around Europe. I never initially had a political role, but even under those circumstances, my mother still made me forcefully marry for a political reason, which is the reason why I've married King Louis. It was not my decision. It was already chosen for me.
Describe the transition from being an Austrian princess to being married to someone who was to become king of a country that was not your own.
On May 16, 1770, it was the beginning of my marriage to King Louis. It was also the beginning of my death. The little I knew how to please the Prince of France was useless to me.
And why do you say that was useless?
Because, I thought I was beautiful. I was taught to be beautiful. I was taught to be obedient, to please, and I just became irrelevant to him. The one thing I had to do to satisfy my duty was to bear an heir for France. And I couldn't even do that, but it was not my fault. It was Louis' fault. I was unable to fulfill my only duty, and I became the laughingstock of France for more than 7 years.
In 1774, that was a huge year for you. You became the Queen of France, in one day to another.
Yes.
How was that?
That wasn't the huge year. 1776.
1776.
Yes, 1776 was a huge year for me.
Mm.
While Louis fulfilled his life with hunting and eating, I fulfilled mine with nightlife, dancing, gambling, and fashion.
Mm.
Yes, I was quite a catch.
And how was it like to finally be able to fulfill this duty that you said you had when you know?
Yes.
How did that become?
It was in 1777. I remember it clearly as daylight today. I could have finally, I thought I could finally have the acceptance of my mother. I wrote to her that me and King Louis had already finally consummated for our marriage.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a year later, 1778, my first child was born.
Okay.
Mary Therese Charlotte.
After you had more than one child at this point, the year was 1789. I'd say was the start of like the French Revolution. Describe the events following July 1789.
I do admit I was busy with keeping up with my self-image.
Mm-hmm.
You have to understand, I had no knowledge of what was going on.
Yes.
My knowledge for politics was very, very little. To me, my duty was fulfilled as the Queen of France. I had given King more than one heir already. It was his job to keep the people under control. It was not mine. And even under these circumstances, I did my best to promote stability to France with the King. They just didn't understand.
You did that while your life was in danger because they wanted you dead. They wanted you gone.
Yes, they sure did want me gone.
Okay, so this is probably one of the most important dates in your lifetime. October 5, 1789 was when a mob from Paris went to Versailles and literally forced you back. Like, what was that? What was that like for you?
It was like when they forced me to marry King Louis and move out of my country. That was my home. And they forced me to come out of my home, the French. Once we moved to Paris, they had us under house arrest, and yet they required me to fulfill my queen duties, such as attend auctions and charities and so on. I did it to please the people.
Mm-hmm.
But I realized there and then that I didn't have to please myself or the people anymore. I had to focus more on my children. And that's what I did.
Well, that's all we have for today. I hope you are enjoying your afternoon. Thank you so much, Marie Antoinette, for coming back.
Yes, thank you. It was your pleasure to be in my presence. Yes.
It was my pleasure to have you next to me. Like,
yes.
such an important icon in our history.
I am. Thank you. Yes, it's very important. I am very important. I'm fabulous.
Yes, of course. Thank you all for listening. Have a nice day.